So I want you to picture the most, like, intimidating, overpowering creature you can possibly imagine out in the wild.
Okay, I'm with you.
I'm talking about a full-grown silverback gorilla. You've seen the documentaries.
Oh, yeah, absolutely terrifying.
Right. This is a creature composed of just pure, unadulterated muscle, like 400 pounds of primal force. It can bend steel bars.
Right, it's a tank.
It beats its chest with a sound that reverberates through the dense jungle, warning literally everything in a 5-mile radius that it is the undisputed king of its domain.
The absolute apex.
Exactly. It is the pinnacle of terrestrial power. Now, keeping that terrifying, majestic image in your head, what if I told you that in the reproductive department, the absolute biological maximum that this terrifying beast is packing is...
Let me guess, it's not what you'd expect.
It is 1¼ inches.
Wow. Yeah, it completely shatters the illusion, doesn't it?
I am absolutely reeling from this. I mean, welcome to the deep dive, everyone. We have a mission today that is, without a doubt, the most unique, highly revealing, and frankly, hilarious exploration we've ever undertaken.
It really is a fun one.
We are pulling back the curtain on evolutionary biology to answer a question that you listening to this right now have almost certainly never stopped to ask.
Or maybe you were just too afraid to ask.
Right. We are looking at the human male anatomy, specifically the penis. Why is it designed the way it is? Because, I mean, once you actually look at the mechanics, absolutely nothing makes sense.
It really doesn't. And we're going to be pulling from a couple of really fascinating sources today to anchor this. We have a wonderfully irreverent excerpt from an evolutionary biology text, specifically focusing on, the bizarre history of human male anatomy.
Which is just a wild read.
Oh, totally. And to balance that out, we're also going to look at a purely visual source.
Right, the restroom sign.
Exactly. The standard ubiquitous stick figure image of a woman that you see on every public restroom sign around the entire world.
Like the circle head, the triangle dress, the absolute universal icon.
Yeah, that one. And our goal is to use these two very different starting points to unpack the invisible million-year-old evolutionary forces that have literally sculpted the human body.
Because we don't really think about it like that, do we?
No, we tend to think of human anatomy as this pristine, fixed given. Like we picture Leonardo da Vinci's Vitruvian Man.
Right, right, the guy in the circle and the square.
Right, that perfectly proportioned figure. We like to imagine we are the result of some, master architectural plan. But today, we're going to look at the body as a living record of ancient compromises, terrifying biological trade-offs,
and prehistoric flexes.
Exactly, prehistoric flexes. It's the ongoing battle between pragmatic survival and the desperate need to show off.
Okay, let's unpack this because I am still stuck on the gorilla, honestly.
Yeah.
Our evolutionary biology text establishes a baseline anomaly that just fundamentally breaks human intuition.
It really throws you for a loop.
Because when we think of the animal kingdom, we just assume that a bigger, stronger, more dominant animal automatically has larger, more robust physical features across the board, like bigger teeth, bigger claws.
Right.
But that is completely wrong.
Yeah, evolutionary biology doesn't care at all about our human intuition regarding size and power. If we look closely at the great apes, our closest genetic cousins, the statistics are genuinely shocking.
I mean, walk me through these stats, because when I read them, they were staggering.
Okay, so let's start with the chimpanzee. Now, chimps are aggressive, highly active primates.
Very intense.
Right. And there's a specific dominant type of chimp that biologists sometimes actually refer to as the testicle king because of their massive reproductive anatomy relative to their body size.
Okay, testicle king, got it.
But when that dominant chimp is fully erect, the anatomy measures in at exactly 3 inches.
3 inches for the absolute king of the chimp troop.
Right, 3 inches. And then you look at the orangutan. These are massive, majestic, tree-swinging apes. Very solitary, very large.
Right, huge animals.
The fully erect anatomy of a male orangutan. 1.5 inches.
Man. And then, of course, the silverback gorilla. The 400-pound monster we started with.
1.25 inches.
It's just so hard to wrap your head around.
But there's a secondary detail here that is, it's absolutely critical to understand just how strange humans are.
Okay, what is it?
For all of those primates, the chimp, the orangutan, the gorilla, when their anatomy is not actively in use for mating, it is completely invisible.
Wait, really? Completely invisible?
Yes, it retracts or is entirely hidden by fur and flesh. You literally cannot see it.
I mean, it's tucked away safely, which makes perfect logical sense if you're out in the jungle. But then we arrive at the human male. the Homo sapiens. And suddenly all the logical rules are just thrown out the window.
Totally out the window.
Because the average human male anatomy is 5 inches long. Even the most poorly endowed human male on Earth is walking around super hung compared to a silverback gorilla.
It's true.
But the really crazy part, the thing that makes us a massive biological anomaly, is that it's highly visible even when it's completely inactive.
Yeah, it's an enormous evolutionary mystery. Why would nature design an organ that just hangs out there, completely exposed all the time, even when there is absolutely no reproductive activity happening?
It's basically a billboard.
It is. There's even a hypothesis among evolutionary biologists that one of the primary reasons early hominids started walking upright, like shifting from walking on all fours to standing fully vertical on 2 legs,
Wait, are you going to say what I think you're going to say?
was specifically to show it off, to put that anatomy front and center on permanent visual display.
Wait, hold on. You're saying that the very hallmark of human evolution, bipedalism, standing upright, might have been driven, at least in part, by a prehistoric desire to just flash the neighborhood.
I mean, it is a genuine theory. When you stand upright, you are exposing the entire front of your body, including your primary reproductive organs, to everyone you interact with.
That is just wild.
For a hominid that was suddenly developing much larger, much more visible anatomy than its primate ancestors, standing up was the biological equivalent of putting your goods in a storefront window.
That is insane. And because we have this incredibly visible, proportionally massive anatomy compared to other apes, human culture has layered an unbelievable amount of symbolic weight onto it.
Oh, massive fact.
Like we've turned a biological anomaly into a cultural monolith.
We really have. And it's fascinating to look at how different cultural lenses interpret that exact same piece of biology.
So the source material brings in a quote from the feminist writer Andrea Dworkin from her 1981 work, and her interpretation is it's incredibly intense.
Very intense.
And just to be super clear with you listening, we are strictly impartial here. We are not taking any sides on the politics of this. We are just neutrally reporting on how the source material frames these conflicting viewpoints.
Absolutely. We're just analyzing the text.
Right. So she essentially maps human behavioral violence directly onto this specific biological form. She argues that the anatomy itself must embody the violence of the male in order for him to be male.
Right.
She states that violence is the male is the penis, and violence is the penis or the sperm ejaculated from it. The core argument is that whatever it can do, it must do forcibly for a man to be considered a man.
Right. So if we look at that perspective objectively, Dworkin is viewing the organ as the ultimate literal symbol of forceful male power, dominance, and systemic aggression.
Yeah.
It is equated directly with a weapon.
Right. But what's so interesting is how the author of our biology text reacts to that exact same framing.
Yeah, his reaction is very different.
He looks at this idea of the anatomy as a weapon of ultimate dominant power. And he essentially says, I feel like I'm being called a dick here, but more importantly, biologically, this symbolism makes absolutely no sense.
Right, because he introduces what we can call the penis paradox. Dworkin, and frankly large parts of human culture, view this organ as a symbol of undeniable civilization-building power.
Yeah, this unbreakable pillar of strength.
But from a purely anatomical, structural standpoint, it is simultaneously the most delicate, fragile, easily injured, and vulnerable body part a human man possesses.
It really is. It is the ultimate design flaw. I love the architectural comedy the author uses to explain the psychological pressure of this paradox.
Oh, the analogies are great.
Because men are walking around with this immense cultural expectation of invulnerable power mapped directly onto incredibly vulnerable tissue.
Right, and he asks the reader to imagine flipping the script to understand that pressure.
Yes. He says, imagine if human civilization had used the female anatomy, specifically the clitoris, as its cornerstone of symbolic power.
Okay, picture that.
Imagine if the Washington Monument wasn't just a smooth stone obelisk, but was carved to look like a massive, moist, engorged clitoris standing in the middle of the Capitol.
It's quite an image.
He argues that if women were forced to look at a giant, highly sensitive, totally exposed monument representing their societal power and dominance, maybe they'd understand the bizarre psychological contradiction men live with every day.
It really highlights the absurdity of the cultural symbolism, and he even brings the Leaning Tower of Pisa into it.
Oh man, he jokes that the Leaning Tower gives him the creeps because it looks like a structural failure of that exact anatomy. He says they should have renamed it the Almost Drooping Tower of Pisa.
Which is hilarious.
And he claims that looking at that visual failure of hydraulics is probably the reason the Italians lost the war. I mean, it's hilarious, but it points to a very real, very serious biological question.
Exactly. Why is it built that way?
Right. Think about this from an engineering perspective. Imagine you are tasked with designing a vital piece of machinery.
Okay, I'm the engineer.
The survival of your entire species depends exclusively on this one machine functioning properly. Would you take the single most sensitive, fragile, easily breakable component, remove all the armor, take away the skeletal support, and just bolt it to the absolute outside of the machine dangling in the wind?
You would never do that. It's terrible design.
Never. You would do exactly what the gorilla did. You would make it tiny, you would retract it behind a thick wall of muscle and fur, and you would only deploy it when absolutely necessary.
Right, keep it safe.
So why in the world did nature design the human male like this? It flies in the face of all logic.
Well, to answer that, we have to transition away from the physical measurements and look at the underlying forces, the unseen architects that actually built the body.
Okay, the architects.
Because it wasn't just one architect. There are two massive, often directly competing forces of evolution that dictate how an organism looks and behaves: natural selection and sexual selection.
Okay, let's start with natural selection, because that's the one we all learned about in high school. Survival of the fittest. The pragmatist.
Right. If we personify natural selection, you have to think of it as a ruthless, unsentimental efficiency expert.
Just strictly numbers.
Its only goals are keeping you alive long enough to reproduce and using the absolute minimum amount of caloric energy required to get you to that point. It is solving problems in nature.
Like what kind of problems?
Predators, extreme weather, starvation. Natural selection strips away everything that isn't strictly necessary for survival. It hates waste. It hates flair.
And importantly, it makes everyone look exactly the same, right?
Precisely. If a specific liver design filters toxins perfectly using minimal energy, natural selection gives that exact same liver to every single member of the species. Uniformity is the hallmark of natural selection.
So how does natural selection view the human male anatomy?
With absolute horror.
Seriously.
As the author brilliantly puts it, dicks don't solve problems in nature.
Yeah, the quote was, "Nobody ever lassoed a wildebeest with his penis."
Exactly. When you were out on the prehistoric savannah, trying to outrun a saber-toothed cat or hunt down a wildebeest for dinner, having a massive, exposed, sensitive appendage bouncing around does absolutely nothing to help you survive.
It's just getting in the way.
In fact, it is an active liability. It can get caught on thorns, it can get infected, it can get bitten. From a pure survival standpoint, it has exactly one pragmatic job: to deliver sperm. That is it.
So when natural selection looks at the gorilla's 1¼ inch stub, it sees a masterpiece.
Oh, it sees perfection. The gorilla's anatomy uses barely any calories to grow. It stays completely hidden, protected from the environment and rival predators. It requires very little biological upkeep, and it successfully delivers sperm.
A flawless, minimalist victory of engineering.
But then natural selection looks at the human male with 5 inches of totally exposed, completely pointless tissue, and it throws its hands up in the air.
It's like, I didn't approve this budget.
Exactly, because natural selection did not build that. Which brings us to the second architect, the one who shows up after the efficiency expert leaves and decides to paint racing stripes and flames all over the machine.
Sexual selection. The show-off.
Exactly.
So explain how this architect works, because it seems to operate on a completely different set of rules.
It really does. While natural selection solves problems with the natural world, sexual selection solves problems with the opposite sex.
Okay.
Its entire purpose is to outcompete your rivals and secure a mate. And it achieves this by abandoning efficiency and fully embracing extravagance.
So what are the hallmarks? How do we know when we are looking at something built by sexual selection instead of natural selection?
There are 3 massive giveaways. First, the trait is age-specific. You don't need it to survive when you are a child. It only appears or reaches its full exaggerated size after puberty, when securing a mate actually becomes biologically relevant.
Okay, check. That perfectly describes the anatomy we're talking about.
Second, it is courtship specific. It actively changes its physical state. It bloats, it enlarges, it changes color, specifically during moments of arousal or courtship display.
Double check.
And third, and this is the most crucial distinction from natural selection, it is highly variable.
Right, because natural selection wants uniformity.
Exactly.
Like
Natural selection gives everyone the exact same efficient liver. But sexually selected traits are chaotic. Every peacock's tail is slightly different. And human anatomy is incredibly variable. There are massive differences in shape, size, resting length, and functionality from one man to the next.
Yeah, the author notes that this variability evokes incredibly strong subjective reactions from potential mates, ranging from intense excitement to revulsion to withering indifference. It is a performance piece.
Which leads us to the massive, overarching biological rule of thumb. This is the aha moment for understanding not just human bodies, but almost all animal behavior.
Hold on me.
Whenever you see a physical trait on a male animal that is utterly pointless for survival, metabolically wasteful, dangerously elaborate, or highly variable, you can guarantee it exists because of female choice.
Female choice. So, hominid women built this.
Over millions and millions of years.
Yeah.
The human penis was not designed by the harsh realities of surviving the Ice Age. It was designed, engineered, and enlarged by generations of hominid females who repeatedly selected mates with larger, more visible anatomy.
Wow.
They chose it, which meant those genes were passed on, which forced the trait to become more and more pronounced with every passing millennium.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. Because if human females were demanding bigger, flashier, more visible anatomy over millions of years, the human male body had to figure out a way to physically support that demand.
Right, it had to adapt.
And the mechanical solution the body came up with is horrifying. We have to talk about what the author calls the boneless boner.
This is where we look at the actual physics of the anatomy,
Oh.
where the human body diverges wildly from almost every other mammal.
Because I had absolutely no idea about this, but other primates literally have bones in their penises, right?
Yes, it's called a baculum. It's an actual skeletal structure inside the reproductive organ.
The author says that when a male chimpanzee sees a female chimp in estrus, when she's signaling that she is ready to mate, his pencil fin anatomy just instantly snaps into position.
Like a switch.
He compares it to a cartoon mechanism. Click, clack, it's locked in place.
And structurally, that is incredibly efficient. If you think about the human body, almost all of our movable parts rely on a skeletal framework to operate against the downward pull of gravity. Your arms, your legs, your fingers.
The text points out that even something as lightweight and seemingly floppy as the human ear requires a complex matrix of stiff cartilage just to hold its basic shape in the air.
Exactly. Bones and cartilage provide cheap, reliable structural integrity.
But humans? Through the relentless, escalating pressure of female sexual selection, human males completely lost that bone. We evolved a boneless boner. It is, from an engineering standpoint, essentially a giant inflatable blood balloon.
Which is an absolute nightmare of physics.
Wait, hold on. Break down the mechanics of this for me. If there is no bone, no cartilage, nothing skeletal, how on earth does it manage to lift that much physical weight and hold it aloft against the force of gravity?
Hydraulics. Intense, heavy-duty, high-pressure hydraulics.
Wow.
To achieve an erection without a bone, the human male body has to rapidly pump a massive volume of blood into highly specialized sponge-like tissue and then basically clamp the valves shut so the blood can't escape.
Sounds exhausting.
It is. The sheer blood pressure required to engorge that much flesh and make it rigid enough to defy gravity is staggering.
It's literally like inflating a car tire with a bicycle pump.
It's an enormous cardiovascular strain, but the mechanical strain isn't even the craziest part. The terrifying part is the biological cost required to fuel that hydraulic system.
Right. The text explains that human males don't just passively inflate this thing. To trigger those hydraulics, the man has to actively flood his system with testosterone. The author brilliantly refers to testosterone as dick fuel, but creating that fuel requires borrowing energy from somewhere else. And where does the body steal that energy from? The immune system.
This is one of the most profound and dangerous evolutionary trade-offs in the human body. Let's really dig into how this works because it explains so much about male biology.
Explain the mechanism to me. How exactly does getting an erection compromise your immune system?
Well, you have to understand that the human body operates on a strict caloric budget. You only have so much energy available at any given moment.
Right.
Every single day, your immune system is fighting a brutal, microscopic war. Your skin, your lungs, your gut, they are the front lines, constantly battling millions of invading bacteria, viruses, and parasites.
So your immune system is like a massive standing army, constantly consuming calories and resources just to keep you alive.
Exactly. Think of the immune system as the ultimate defensive general. This general needs a constant, massive supply line of energy, white blood cells, and lymphocytes sent to the borders to fight off disease.
Makes sense.
But then a mating opportunity appears. Sexual selection steps in and demands a display. To inflate the anatomy, the body has to spike its testosterone levels.
And what does the testosterone do to the general?
Testosterone is biologically recognized as an immunosuppressant. When testosterone levels spike to fuel the reproductive hydraulics, it literally signals the body to pull energy away from immune function.
Are you serious?
It's as if the leader of a country suddenly ordered the defensive general to cut off the supply lines, halt the ammunition and food going to the troops fighting the plague at the borders, and instead divert all that energy back to the capital city just to rapidly inflate a giant kingly monument for a parade.
Just to show off for a passing female.
Precisely. You are artificially crippling your own defenses. You are leaving the gates totally unguarded to viruses and bacteria, purely to power a temporary mating display.
The text phrases this in a way that gave me chills. It essentially says that human males are literally risking death for sex. They are deliberately lowering their armor, inviting infection and disease, just to prove they can operate this ridiculous hydraulic blood balloon.
It's true.
But why would any species evolve a system that actively tries to kill it just to flirt?
Because of a concept in evolutionary biology called the handicap principle. The fact that it is so dangerous, so metabolically expensive, and so difficult to achieve is exactly what makes it valuable. It makes the erection what biologists call a primary fitness indicator.
Okay, what is a primary fitness indicator?
It is an honest signal of health. You see this all over the animal kingdom. Think about the peacock. A peacock grows this massive, heavy, incredibly vibrant tail.
Right, huge tail.
It makes it hard to fly, makes it easy for tigers to spot them, and it takes massive amounts of calories to grow the feathers.
That's a huge handicap.
Exactly. Or look at bowerbirds, spending weeks building these intricate, perfectly decorated little houses out of blue twigs and berries just to impress a female.
Or toucans with those massive, heavy, colorful beaks that aren't actually great for fighting. Or gibbons screaming these incredibly loud, complex, breathless hoots through the jungle canopy that alert every predator to their exact location.
All of these things are dangerous, exhausting, and pointless for survival.
But they are primary fitness indicators because you cannot fake them. That's the key. They are honest. If a peacock is sick or has a heavy parasite load or isn't getting enough nutrition, it simply does not have the biological energy to grow bright feathers.
Oh, I see.
The tail looks dull and ragged. The female sees the ragged tail and instantly knows this male has bad genetics or is currently diseased.
Ah, so she knows not to mate with him.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the human boneless hydraulic erection is the exact same thing. It is an utterly unforgiving, impossible-to-fake gauge of a man's overall cardiovascular and genetic health.
Because if the system is compromised even slightly, the balloon doesn't inflate. Right. If a human male has a hidden viral infection, or a tiny cancerous mutation draining his energy, or a compromised cardiovascular system, or even if he's just suffering from severe psychological stress,
The body won't let it happen.
the body simply will not allow the diversion of resources. The general refuses to pull the troops from the border. The hydraulics fail.
Which perfectly explains why men are so deeply, existentially terrified of impotence.
Oh, absolutely.
The author makes a joke about not wanting to talk about it too much for fear of jinxing himself, but biologically, impotence isn't just an embarrassing mechanical glitch. On a prehistoric subconscious level, an inability to perform is broadcasting a massive evolutionary failure signal to a potential mate.
It is the ultimate check engine light. It's the body betraying the man and announcing to the woman, do not mix your genes with this organism, his systems are failing.
It's the body saying the quiet part out loud, and when the hydraulics actually work perfectly, it's the ultimate flex.
Like ultimate show off.
The text translates the biological signal of a successful erection so perfectly. It's as if the male body is shouting, look how much energy I can waste. Look at this completely pointless, structurally precarious, highly dangerous stunt. I have no parasites. I have no bad genetic mutations. I can perform an upright erection without a skeletal burn, lifting 10 times the tissue weight of a gorilla while borrowing half the blood from my brain and actively suppressing my own immune system.
And generation after generation, hominid females looked at that ridiculous, dangerous display and said, ooh.
They loved it.
They selected the males who could pull off the stunt. They collected those big anatomy, high-risk genes, and the bar was continually raised for the next generation.
It is an evolutionary arms race of showing off.
Right.
But here is where the rubber meets the road. Nature doesn't give you unlimited resources. We talked about the caloric budget.
Right, you only have so much energy.
If you are spending a massive chunk of your evolutionary points building and fueling this giant hydraulic appendage, You have to cut costs somewhere else. And this directly dictates how human males behave in the real world.
Yes, we have to talk about the evolutionary budget. The text introduces a fascinating behavioral rule that applies across countless species.
What's the rule?
Males generally get either big dances or big genitalia. They almost never get both.
Because you literally cannot afford it biologically. It's like creating a character in a role-playing game. You only have 100 skill points to distribute. If you put 90 points into massive reproductive anatomy, you only have 10 points left for courtship behavior.
That is exactly how it works. The biological budget won't allow a species to sustain two massive, highly energy-draining mating strategies simultaneously.
The comparisons the author makes to illustrate this are brilliant. He points to the great white egret. Have you ever seen an egret try to attract a mate?
It is a spectacular athletic performance.
Yeah. They leap into the air, they cavort, they perform these incredibly high-energy synchronized courtship dances. They are burning calories like crazy, and their actual physical anatomy, completely invisible.
They spent it all on the dance.
They spent their entire evolutionary budget on the footwork.
Now contrast the dancing egret with the mandrill monkey. Mandrills are the primates, with those incredibly vivid, psychedelic red and blue colors plastered across their faces and their scrotums.
Right, very flashy.
They have evolved highly elaborate, heavily ornamented, instantly visible genital displays.
And what do they do to attract females?
Absolutely nothing.
Nothing. The author says they have absolutely nothing to prove. They don't do any display strutting. They don't leap around or dance. They just sit there.
They let the anatomy do the work.
They know they look incredible. The physical anatomy is doing 100% of the talking, so the behavioral budget is 0.
So if we take the strict biological budget equation and apply it to Homo sapiens.
Oh man, the author skewers human men so perfectly here. He points out that human males have evolved these titanic, highly elaborate, energy-draining penises, which provides the ultimate biological excuse for why, as a rule, human men are generally terrible dancers.
We simply didn't evolve the behavioral imperative for complex courtship movement.
He practically begs the reader to go do some anthropological field research at a local dance club on a Saturday night, watch the men try to dance. He self-deprecatingly admits that his own groove and booty bumps rarely have the seductive, hypnotic effect on women that he intends.
We spent all our points on the hardware.
We spent all our evolutionary points on the hardware and left absolutely nothing for rhythm or choreography.
It's a hilarious observation, but it is deeply grounded in the biological concept of trade-offs. If your species has heavily invested in a static physical ornament to visually attract mates, the evolutionary pressure to develop complex, energy-intensive behavioral displays disappears.
And he extrapolates this trade-off into modern, everyday human behavior, which I found fascinating. He suggests there is a direct inverse correlation between aggressive display behavior, what he calls display strutting, and anatomical confidence.
How does he frame that?
He jokes about how different animals display. Gorillas beat their massive chests. Chimps do these terrifying, screaming, charging displays where they rip up grass. Egrets do their elaborate leaps.
And human males.
Human males with titanic, genetically superior anatomy. They don't need to do any of that. They have the quiet confidence of the mandrill. But human males who don't have that anatomical confidence, the ones who feel a biological shortfall, he says they drive oversized SUVs.
They replace the missing biological display with a mechanical one.
Exactly. They are doing aggressive, high-energy display strutting with their massive vehicles to overcompensate for what natural selection didn't give them. They rev their engines and tailgate people. Meanwhile, the author notes he very calmly drives a stubby little white car.
It's a very funny way to look at traffic, but it ties back to another crucial question raised in the text regarding primate social structures.
Yikes.
The size of the male anatomy isn't just about showing off to females. It is also deeply intertwined with whether a species is historically monogamous or promiscuous.
Right, the monogamy factor. If there is anyone listening right now who is happily married and believes that humans are naturally, biologically destined for strict monogamy, the author has some very bad news for you based on the tape measure.
Let's explain the biology behind this. How does mating structure affect anatomical size?
Well, the author points out that strict monogamous primates, species where one male pairs off with one female exclusively for life, they tend to have absolutely tiny reproductive anatomy.
He uses the owl monkey as the prime example here.
Yes, the incredibly faithful, deeply monogamous male owl monkey. If you look at an owl monkey, its penis is essentially non-existent. It's a tiny, dinky little thing.
And from an evolutionary standpoint, why would it need to be big?
Exactly. If you are an owl monkey and you are the only male mating with your female partner, there is zero competition. Natural selection steps back in, looks at the situation, and says, hey, no need to waste precious calories building a massive hydraulic weapon here. There's no one else competing for her egg. Just deliver the sperm and go find some fruit.
But promiscuous primates live in a completely different reality.
Totally. In a promiscuous species, like chimpanzees or early hominids, multiple males are mating with the exact same females in a very short window of time. This creates a state of intense microscopic warfare called sperm competition.
Break down the mechanics of sperm competition because it dictates the entire architecture of the reproductive tract.
It is a literal race to the egg inside the female's body. If 3 different males mate with a female, the male who can physically deliver his sperm closest to the target, bypassing the hostile environment of the lower reproductive tract, has a massive mathematical advantage in actually fertilizing the egg and passing on his genes.
Makes sense.
So evolution creates an arms race. Males with longer anatomy deliver sperm deeper, their genes win out, and over millions of years, the anatomy of the entire species gets huge.
So anatomical size is essentially a biological fossil record of a species' promiscuity.
Yes. Which leads to the absolute funniest relationship advice I have ever read in a biology textbook.
Oh, this part is great.
The author says, the next time your wife claims she is completely, purely faithful and that humans are meant to be monogamous, you should just point down to your human anatomy and say, oh yeah, then how come my dick is so big? If we were truly meant to be faithful, we would look exactly like the owl monkey.
And the reverse is true as well.
Oh, absolutely. He says if a husband swears to his wife that he was just out with the boys and definitely wasn't cheating, the wife should demand, prove it. Drop your pants and show me your tiny owl monkey penis.
It perfectly illustrates the point that our physical bodies bear the undeniable hallmarks of our ancestral mating habits. We might have modern cultural rules regarding marriage and monogamy, but our biology was forged in a highly competitive, highly promiscuous prehistoric environment.
Okay, let's recap where we are, because the picture we've painted of the human male is astounding.
It really is.
The body is not a perfectly efficient, divinely planned machine. The most vulnerable, fragile part is hanging completely unprotected on the outside. It is powered by a dangerous, high-pressure hydraulic system that literally hijacks and suppresses the immune system, risking disease and death.
A huge risk.
And all of this happened because millions of years ago, hominid females decided they liked the look of it. The author beautifully calls the soft, elegant, vulnerable male penis a feminine sculpture.
I love that phrase.
It is a piece of art designed and enlarged by generations of women molding it to their exact specifications.
It is a profound shift in perspective. But this realization immediately forces us to ask another equally important question.
Right.
And this transitions us to the flip side of the evolutionary coin.
Okay, what is it?
If female choice sculpts male anatomy into these bizarre, wasteful, dangerous displays, does male choice do the exact same thing to female anatomy?
Absolutely. Sexual selection is a two-way street, and this is where we have to bring in our second piece of source material, the visual source, the standard stick figure woman from the public restroom sign.
Right. Let's really deconstruct that image for a moment. What are we actually looking at when we see that sign?
We are looking at the most basic, hyper-utilitarian visual coding of the female form that human beings could invent. It is a circle for a head, a straight vertical line for a body, and a geometric triangle layered over the middle to represent a dress or a skirt.
Pure function.
It is pure, unadulterated function. It was designed to be instantly recognizable from 50 feet away in a dimly lit, crowded airport terminal.
If we were to equate that sign to biology, it is the visual representation of natural selection. It is minimalist. It is uniform. There's no wasted ink, no wasted energy.
But when we contrast that purely functional, straight-lined icon with the biological reality of the actual human female form, we see a massive, glaring discrepancy.
We certainly do.
Just like the male anatomy, the human female body features extreme, highly pronounced energy-wasting curves that simply do not exist purely for survival.
The evolutionary text addresses this explicitly. It states that once early hominid men and women began judging and choosing each other based on these highly visible biological fitness signs, The physical forms of both sexes got out of hand.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
And the prime example the author explores is what we can call the breast paradox.
Let's break down the biological conflict surrounding human female breasts, because it perfectly mirrors the absurdity of the penis paradox we just spent the last half hour discussing.
The author makes a very blunt observation. Human women evolved pointlessly perky breasts. Now, we have to define why they are considered pointless from the strict perspective of natural selection.
Okay, why pointless?
It comes down to a literal physical conflict of interest over the exact same piece of anatomy between an infant and an adult male.
Wait, how does an infant's need conflict with a male's desire?
Well, if we look at this purely from the perspective of an infant who needs to nurse, which is the only thing natural selection cares about because it's about keeping the offspring alive,
Right.
the ideal anatomical design for lactation is a small, flat, highly efficient squirter of milk.
Like almost every other mammal on Earth.
Exactly. When a dog or a cat or a chimpanzee is not actively nursing, their mammary glands are flat against the body. They only swell slightly when filled with milk. Massive deposits of permanent fatty tissue are completely unnecessary for the actual biological function of producing and delivering milk.
In fact, the text makes a startling mechanical claim here. It says that the exaggerated size of human breasts actually makes it harder to nurse infants.
Yes. From an engineering standpoint, having the nipple located on a large amount of fatty tissue can make latching more difficult for a newborn, and it requires the mother to physically support the breast to prevent suffocating the child.
That's crazy.
It is a mechanical hindrance to the exact job the organ is supposed to perform.
Okay, so if it makes nursing harder and it wastes massive amounts of caloric energy to grow and carry around, why on earth do human women have them?
Because of the adult male. As the text states, men wanted them.
Explain how that desire actually shapes the biology.
Early hominid males were desperately trying to figure out which females were the most fertile, the healthiest, and had the most energy reserves to successfully raise an infant to adulthood.
Right, looking for the best genes.
A female who is actively nursing a child, meaning her milk glands are swollen, cannot get pregnant. So males began looking for visual cues of fertility and energy. Over time, females evolved large deposits of fat on their chests, specifically to mimic the swollen look of engorged milk glands.
Oh, wow. So they evolved a biological illusion?
Exactly. They developed breasts that were overbloated with fat, so that they seemed like highly efficient squirters of milk, even though the fat itself doesn't produce a single drop of milk. It was a visual cue of youth, health, and caloric reserves.
The author notes that human breasts range widely in size and shape from woman to woman. They waste a massive amount of metabolic energy to grow and maintain, and they are practically inconvenient for the woman carrying them while hunting or gathering.
Now let's refer back to the universal rule we established earlier.
Right.
When you observe a physical trait that is highly variable, that wastes precious caloric energy,
Yeah.
and that is fundamentally inconvenient or even detrimental to pure survival, what are you looking at?
You are looking at a trait built by sexual selection, in this case, built by millions of years of male choice.
It creates this beautiful, if somewhat bizarre, biological symmetry between the sexes. The text observes that our human hands are famous for fashioning stone tools, discovering fire, and building civilizations.
Yeah.
But over the vast expanse of evolutionary time, our hands and our eyes have done something much more profound. They've quite literally fashioned our physical forms.
It really is incredible poetry. Think about it. A prehistoric man's hands on a woman's body, his eyes judging her fitness, choosing her over another female, generation after generation for millions of years. He literally sculpted her.
Yes.
His prehistoric mating choices bred human women to have permanently rounded breasts and the exaggerated curved hourglass shape. These are massive, energy-draining displays of baby-making potential that serve absolutely zero practical survival purpose against a saber-toothed cat. They exist purely to attract a mate.
And simultaneously, the prehistoric woman's gaze and choices were molding the delicate, dangerous hydraulic anatomy of the male.
We literally designed each other's bodies. We sculpted each other purely to attract one another. It's romantic in a deeply weird biological way.
It is a powerful narrative of mutual sculpting. But
Oh, there's a but. There's always a but.
there is always a but in evolutionary biology.
Hmm.
Just as we think we have the entire picture perfectly framed, men choosing women, women choosing men, in this beautiful dance of sexual selection.
Right.
The text introduces a final supplemental theory. And this theory throws a massive aggressive twist into everything we have discussed so far.
Okay, lay it on me, because I feel like I finally understand how all this works.
What if all of this, the massive size of the anatomy, the incredibly wasteful biological display, the immense energy expenditure, what if it wasn't just about attracting women?
Wait, what? Are you saying it wasn't female choice?
I'm saying it might not have been only female choice.
Mm.
We have to look at something called the intimidation factor, what evolutionary biologists call the locker room theory.
Okay, how does this work?
The author notes that some biologists aren't entirely satisfied with the idea that female choice is the sole architect of the male anatomy. They quote to a broader biological concept called same-sex dimorphism.
Same-sex dimorphism.
Yes. This is the reality that highly exaggerated sexually dimorphic traits often evolve not just to charm the opposite sex, but to directly threaten, affect, and intimidate same-sex rivals.
So it's the biological difference between dressing up in a nice suit for a romantic date versus puffing out your chest and flexing your arms when another guy bumps into you at a crowded bar.
Precisely. And there is explicit primate precedent for this behavior. The text brings up vervet monkeys as a prime example of this alternate hypothesis in action.
Tell me about the vervet monkeys, because this is wild.
When male vervet monkeys are threatened by rival males or when they are competing for territory or status within the troop, they don't just bare their teeth or beat their chests.
What do they do?
They posture, they make aggressive faces, and they literally sprout spontaneous erections from their brightly colored red, white, and blue genitalia, specifically to posture and intimidate the other males.
No way.
Yes. They are using their reproductive anatomy as a direct weapon of psychological warfare against their peers.
That is terrifying and hilarious. They are literally flashing each other to establish dominance.
Yeah.
Okay, but that's monkeys. How does the author connect vervet monkey intimidation tactics to modern human males?
He brings in a highly specific, modern-day piece of medical evidence, courtesy of a doctor with perhaps the most unfortunate name in medical history.
Oh, this is the absolute best part of the text. The author introduces us to Dr. R.H. Stubbs.
You really have to appreciate the profound irony of the universe sometimes.
The author says that Dr. Stubbs is one of his personal heroes purely for, quote, overcoming name disability. Because Dr. Stubbs, despite his last name, is a professional practicing penis lengthener. You literally cannot write comedy this good.
It's incredible. But Dr. Stubbs isn't just a punchline. He is a source of vital data, because he collected statistics on the psychological motivations of the men who come to his clinic seeking this surgical enlargement, and the data completely reframes the conversation.
So what did the data show? Because if it's all about sexual selection, you'd assume 100% of these men are getting surgery to impress women in the bedroom.
That's the logical assumption.
Yeah.
But Dr. Stubbs found that a massive majority of the men applying for this highly invasive surgery explicitly cite locker room embarrassment as their primary motivation.
So what does this all mean? Let that sink in for a second.
According to the data, only about a third of the patients cite bedroom embarrassment with a female partner as their reason.
2/3 of these men are perfectly fine with what their wives or girlfriends think. Their anxiety, the driving force that pushes them to seek surgery, is entirely focused on what other men think when they are standing naked in a locker room.
Exactly.
They are terrified of the judgment of their male peers.
So we have to ask, what does this mean biologically? If we synthesize Dr. Stubbs's data with the evolutionary theories of same-sex dimorphism, we get a much darker, much more aggressive picture of early hominid life.
Let's draw the parallel to muscles, because the text makes this comparison and it clicked instantly for me. Big, bulging, heavily veined bodybuilder muscles. Who are those actually for?
Right. Sociological studies consistently show that massive, hyper-exaggerated musculature is actually much more important to men than it is to women. Women generally select for a baseline of athletic fitness and health, but the extreme 250-pound, single-digit body fat, veiny bodybuilder look.
That is entirely for other guys. Guys look at bodybuilders and say, wow, look at the deltoids on that dude. Women generally do not care. The text states explicitly that huge muscles served evolutionarily more to intimidate rival men than to attract women.
So apply that exact same evolutionary logic to the anatomy we've been discussing. Imagine early hominid hunters living in highly competitive, tightly knit, status-driven groups on the savanna.
Okay, I'm imagining it. If you are the guy in the tribe walking around with the largest, most highly visible anatomy, maybe the other guys subconsciously defer to you. It's the vervet monkey effect.
Exactly. Maybe visual size was a crucial marker of dominance. If you look physically dominant, maybe the other males don't challenge you for leadership of the hunting party. Maybe they give you the best, most calorie-dense cut of meat from the kill.
And if that anatomically conferred status leads to you getting better food and better shelter and higher social rank,
Then you are much more likely to survive the harsh Paleolithic winter. And more importantly, your offspring are much more likely to survive because you have the resources to feed them.
which means your big anatomy genes get passed on.
Precisely. If that is the case, then female choice isn't the whole story. Male-to-male competition, intimidation, and status posturing also had a massive, heavy hand in sculpting the human penis.
It wasn't just designed to be a beautiful sculpture for women. It was designed to be a psychological weapon against other men. The text ends this section with a line that just perfectly summarizes the shift we've taken today, from the divine blueprint to the dirty, competitive reality of evolution. The author writes, and I quote, "Religious leaders tell us our bodies were fashioned by the hand of God, but biology tells us our penises might have been fashioned by the hand of a certain kind of man."
It is an incredibly provocative conclusion to a deeply complex, multi-layered biological story.
It really is. I mean, think about the journey we have just been on. We have looked at this single piece of anatomy from almost every conceivable angle. We started by completely shattering our intuition, looking at the sheer statistical anomaly of the human male compared to our ape cousins.
The realization that dominant, terrifying chimps are rocking 3 inches.
Right, and massive gorillas are working with 1 1/4.
And then we dove into the terrifying, high-stakes engineering of the boneless boner. The realization that men traded a perfectly functional skeletal baculum for a precarious, high-pressure hydraulic system.
We looked at the sheer danger of that system. The fact that fueling those hydraulics requires men to hijack their own immune systems, deliberately lowering their defenses against disease, just to provide an honest, unfakeable primary fitness indicator to females. It's a literal life or death flex.
We explore the biological budgets and behavioral trade-offs, how our massive evolutionary investment in physical anatomy completely drained our capacity for complex courtship dances, leaving us looking foolish on the dance floor compared to an egret.
Yeah, the groove and booty bumps. We looked at how our ancestral mating structures, the intense sperm competition of our promiscuous past versus the quiet certainty of monogamy, literally dictated our physical size, leaving the poor, faithful owl monkey with almost nothing to show for it.
We flipped the entire paradigm and looked at how male choice drove the evolution of the female form, how the male desire for visual cues of fertility forced the evolution of the beautifully inefficient, energy-wasting curves of the breast and the hourglass figure, creating a biological reality completely at odds with the pure utility of the restroom stick figure sign.
And finally, we brought in the locker room theory. The realization that the intense, judging, status-driven gaze of rival males, the psychological warfare of the vervet monkeys, might have been just as powerful an evolutionary sculptor as the selecting eyes of females.
It is a staggering amount of invisible history carried in our flesh. Every time you look in the mirror, you have to realize that you are not looking at a perfectly rational, hyper-efficient machine built for sheer survival.
No, you are looking at a messy, chaotic, living museum. Your body is a walking fossil record of prehistoric mating choices, dangerous biological arms races, and ancient intimidation tactics.
Which leaves us with one final lingering question, a provocation that I think anyone listening to this needs to seriously ponder,
Right.
based entirely on the evolutionary forces we've discussed today.
Let's hear it.
We have spent this entire hour establishing that these incredible physical forms, the massive male anatomy, the exaggerated female curves, they are primary fitness indicators. They are hyper-visible, metabolically expensive displays of health, energy, and genetic quality. And they were designed over millions and millions of years purely for naked visual courtship and status displays.
Right. They are billboards, and a billboard only works if it is actively seen by the audience.
Exactly. So what happens to the evolution of our species right now? We spent millions of years meticulously building these highly elaborate visual signaling systems. And then just a tiny blip of time ago, a few thousand years, we invented clothes.
Oh, wow.
We covered everything up. We hid the primary fitness indicators, the very tools we use to choose our mates, behind layers of denim, cotton, and wool.
That is profound.
Are we currently flying completely blind to the evolutionary mating game? Have we, through the invention of fashion and modesty, short-circuited the very mechanism of sexual selection that originally designed us?
That is a thought that is going to stick with me for a long, long time. We spend millions of years building the ultimate high-risk show-off monuments, and then we just threw a tarp over them. And now we have to guess what's underneath before we pass on our genes. Incredible. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the source material. We genuinely hope this exploration gave you a completely new perspective on the weird, wild, and deeply inefficient world of human biology. Keep questioning the blueprints, keep looking for the hidden evolutionary forces behind the everyday world, and we will see you next time.